UOWD On-Air. I'm delighted to welcome one of the top 30 PR hospitality hotshots Middle East 2024, Jemma Starzecki. Welcome, Jemma. Our industry guest. Jemma is a passionate marketing leader with 18 years of experience driving brand growth, customer engagement, and market innovation across diverse industries. Skilled in crafting impactful strategies that align global vision with regional nuances, particularly within the MENA market. Adept at leading high performing teams, delivering data driven campaigns, and fostering brand loyalty through creative, customer centric approaches. Excited to bring also our assistant professor, Dr. Rumaila Abbas, who is been with the University of Wollongong for about 3 years, 3.5 years. She previously taught at the Kelly School of Business at Indiana University and holds a PhD in marketing from the University of Guelph in Canada. Her industry background includes roles at Colgate Palmolive, Unilever, and Reckitt and Benckiser. Her research centers on transformative consumer research and consumer well-being. She teaches courses in digital marketing, new product development, and digital marketing communication, with a strong emphasis on integrating industry experience into the classroom through applied and experiential learning. She has presented her work at major academic conferences and published in reputable journals. So, welcome, Rumaila and Jemma.
Thank you.
Let's start with my first question today is really about the strategic approach behind the launch of Flavor and Glitch as key brand activations. And from what I understand, you also won the Guinness World Record at Flavia, and how such initiatives build lasting consumer relationships.
Yes, it's a very interesting one. So, the launch of Glitch and Flavour basically came from working with retail industry expert Phil McCarthy, who did an analysis on Al Ghurair Centre Mall. What could we do to improve the mall? How could we drive more footfall to the mall? Obviously, especially post COVID, when there was a lot of retailers shutting down, different things. How could we transform the mall? So it was more about how could we evolve the mall, create an evolution rather than a revolution. We had like a very big legacy within Old Dubai in Dira. So how can we actually try and generate experience? What was missing from the mall? So first came Glitch, our family entertainment centre. So we identified the need that, especially in this day and age, that people want to come, families want to come for more than just retail. They want to have an experience. They want to go somewhere maybe for a few hours. So how can we do more and offer more than just simply going shopping? So along came the idea of creating our own family entertainment centre. And in terms of, the marketing aspect of that, my job was, okay, how do we, make this exciting? This came from like even naming Glitch, its name, and making it something a bit different. We wanted to stand out in the market against some of the other leading competitors. So we decided to create a brand that was not just about the simple, this isn't a family entertainment centre, but actually making it fun to look at and actually targeting, those families that not just only have young children, but also those, the teenagers, the tweens that are, looking at, content all the time on social. So we came up with the idea of Glitch. And I think from my perspective, I am always about innovation in marketing. I'm always about what's the big idea, but also in the back of my mind, how does that stack up commercially? Because it's all well and good having a big idea, but actually you still need to think, what's this going to achieve? And ultimately, we wanted to launch with a big bang. So we launched a 50-foot ball on Dubai Creek to basically drive noise, drive buzz and excitement. It was a very exciting thing to work on, and it kind of basically put a stake in the ground as to what we were going to deliver moving forward. So that was really exciting. And then Flavour, it was definitely part of that strategy too. In the part of Dubai that we're in, we're looking at a certain demographic of people. We wanted to firstly, from a commercial perspective, offer an alternative between the price point of the food court and your fast food restaurants, and also between that and actually more formal dining. What could we offer in between that price point. So we'd obviously already launched Glitch, and we didn't want to give the food hall a boring name, right? We'd given Glitch a really cool name, and that was showing the direction that we were going in. So actually, what could we call our food hall? And we decided, we did a lot of we did a lot of rounds with our agency, especially in marketing, everyone's got an opinion. And we came up with flavour as a kind of play on words, because ultimately the destination we wanted to create was a diverse range of flavour for people to enjoy. We never intended to compete with some of the other well-known food halls within Dubai. This wasn't about that. This was actually creating a unique destination where not only people could enjoy a variety of cuisines at a valued price, but also a place where people could come together.
Right.
A place that families could come, friends could come, enjoy the space. Like I said, not formal, not your food court, but that in-between space where people could relax. They could get their dinner, they could also get their dessert, they could just enjoy that space. And we've continuously tried to do that. And then one of the things that, I believe firmly in marketing, and this is why we kind of did the Guinness World Record as well, is as much as what I would say the business as usual marketing is important, that you're constantly, supporting your retailers or your vendors, or, you still need to drive those peaks throughout the year, right? Peaks are really important because in the world we're in today, everyone's looking for the next big thing. How do you drive that surge of interest? And that's what the Guinness World Record was about. It was about, okay, how can we step outside the box? Because it's quite easy just to get into the mind frame of, okay, we have a food hall, it's amazing, come along. And it just feels like you can't say that for too long. Like, actually, how can we create something exciting that people can talk about? So I'd done Guinness World Record activities in the past, and I thought, you know what, this could be a really interesting way to kind of elevate our food hall in a way no one else has done before. Right. So we decided to do the largest shawarma tasting event, which was a mass participation event, which was very exciting, and we hosted it in flavour, which made that people in the community could watch, be a part of it. And we were successful as well, which was also really great. So in a nutshell, back to your question, Flavour and Glitch were about looking at the future of the mall. How do we, like I said, we're not competing with those other malls, but actually how do we evolve our mall and make our mall a destination for people to enjoy food, retail, entertainment, and drive that destination, and most importantly, for my KPIs, is increase footfall into the mall. Yes. Yeah, which is really important.
Thank you very much, Gemma. So I'll cotton on to that last point a little bit. That was really about, taking our mall to the next level, and a lot of what you talk about is essentially focused on providing a space for your consumers, your customers, to have an immersive experience, and thereby create more of a closeness with the brand, if I may say. Yes. Yeah. So we've seen many campaigns in UAE using a dynamic approach to experiential marketing, blending technology, storytelling, and immersive experiences to engage audiences effectively. So what does experiential marketing mean to you as a brand, and how have you seen it really impacting the business?
Firstly, I would say throughout most of my career, I've really realised that people like to play, people like to have fun, right? And I think as marketeers, as commercial leaders, sometimes we can get caught up in our business objectives, right. Of we need to drive this revenue, we need to drive this footfall, and how do we get there quicker? And actually, often, and I tell my team this a lot, you need to take a step back and think about, what would you enjoy that? Would you want to do that? Just because you get an ad shown in your face, like, actually, are you going to interact with that? So for me, creating those, experiences is really important. Yeah. People like to play, people like to be part of something. And I think obviously we're in 2025 now, social media is just our day-to-day life, and especially with the generation, a lot of the kind of Gen Z generation, and even Gen Alpha probably now, they're looking for what's trendy.
Right.
Where can I get a good picture, And often that is in the back of my head whenever I'm doing anything experiential. We did an amazing activation at the start of the year, The Game, based on a very well-known Netflix series, and it was something we decided to do and thought, you know what, we can do it in the mall, we can bring footfall, and, we kind of like put some leaflets around the mall, made it exciting, digital applications, all of that kind of stuff. And, we generated like 8,000 registrations for that activation, and we could only have 300 people. It was insane. And it showed that, there was a monetary prize, right? But at the end of the day, normally, and I've seen it, when there's a big prize and there's only one of them, it can go either way. People think, I'm not going to bother entering because we've not got a chance.
Right.
Or, okay, I'll give it a go. And actually, from being at the experience, the contestants that got knocked out, even early on, I was saying goodbye to them as they were leaving. Pretty much 90% of them said, do you know what? Thank you so much for the most amazing experience. It actually didn't matter about the money.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yes, that might have enticed people originally, but actually they had the most fun. They were part of something. They were part of a community. They were part of something that some other people weren't. It felt exclusive. And I think exclusivity is a big thing as well now when it comes to what people want to engage with. They want to think, I've done that, you haven't. Look at me, all of that kind of stuff. So I think for me, going back to your question, thinking about experiential marketing, I think everything's on the table. And actually, I've seen recently, because obviously AI and technology is massive in our day-to-day, but I've seen a lot of brands go back to basics.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting part. You've got some of the big beauty brands and stuff, and they're doing simple things. And I'm not just talking about the UAE, I'm talking about in other parts of the world like London, New York. And they're simply driving a decorated, fitted out, want of a better word, ice cream truck.
Right.
And handing out free coffees with their brand on it, and inviting customers in the back to have a free makeover. That's an experience. It's not AI, it's not technology. It actually goes back to some of the most basic things that as people we enjoy, and I think that's quite an interesting thing at the moment. I think there's all this worry about technology, and I think yes, you need to keep an eye on it. Yes, you need to be up to date with it, but actually some of the things we do enjoy are those human interactions, and I think that's really important.
Beautiful. So it's really about building meaningful relationships. I'll come to you now, Rumaila. Clearly there is a lot of AI is not the future. AI is here, right? And there's a lot of emphasis on bringing our students up to par with the kind of skill sets required by industry. But from what Jemma is saying, the core remains very, very important, which is you have to build meaningful relationships with the people out there, which essentially means you have to understand their contexts, their needs, their unique aspirations in order to be able to make a difference. So how are you balancing that this rush towards preparing students for technology, which is absolutely fundamental, while still enabling them to develop the kind of meta skills that is needed for them to make sense of the world around them, to immerse themselves in that context? What are we doing differently? What are you doing differently?
No, I think that's a great question. Thank you for that. And I think I'll take a segue from what you just said. I loved how you said that going back to the basics. And I think that's a question that keeps marketers up at night, because we are evolving so fast with technology. We're using technological platforms to generate content, to automate things that we used to have to do ourselves, and fundamentally don't even need a human being in between, right? Rolling out these processes. So what then becomes the role of these future marketers that we're producing in our institutes, right? And I think this is where it becomes really important to go back to the real why behind we do things, right? The strategy or the strategic aspects, which often in this rush to embrace technology students and the younger generation, when they're going out, they're executing, but are they asking the why? And I think that has become a pivotal shift or a reminder for institutions that we definitely need both. We need the strategic thinking. We need our students to be asking these critical questions of why are we doing what we're doing? What is the point behind it? And that comes through really well in some of the things that you were saying. What was the fundamental that we were trying to give to the consumer, right? And then if we get them to ask those critical questions, if we get them to understand that strategic push behind it, that's where technology becomes this amazing tool to create that output, right? And right now we see it all around us. So if we see digital platforms, AI tools, so on, they are amazing in helping with the execution. In fact, doing it much faster and better than we have been able to, right? But if we don't get the why behind it, then we struggle. It's like, why are we executing the way? So some of the things I think which comes to an institute such as even ours, right? And all these marketing institutes which are teaching business and marketing fundamentally, I think it's really important to remember how can we give our students these immersive experiences, right? That teach them skills which add on to their critical thinking processes. So we ask them to, or we teach them to fail within this institute so that they can go out and work with practitioners such as yourself and be better. So one of some of the things that we're doing here at UOWD and really changing how we're teaching marketing is we're looking at technology is not something that we just create one subject for.
Yeah.
Even though we have made major changes to our curricula, we're making changes such as introducing AI marketing courses, AI-driven digital marketing. But at the same time, this is something that has to come through in all the marketing subjects or all the business subjects, so to say, and it is. But at the same time, how can we also then give them the skills? So we're teaching them how to think, we're teaching them how to critically reflect. So the skills are coming through stackable credentials such as certifications or immersive simulations where they can fail here, they can make mistakes here in that immersive experience and really ask, what did I get out of that? What was the learning? So that when they go out, then they're really doing better and so on. Another thing that I do think has become critical in this space is that industry and academia have often been, we talk about as academics that we must work together and we must have that connection, but very often we tend to miss that. And right now, more than ever, that industry-academic bridge needs to be shortened and tightened, and that's where teaching students, even currently, like we have a lot of case studies or projects that we have practitioners such as yourself are nice enough to come in and give our students a real problem, tell them how to answer it, how to deal with this. They learn, they sometimes say things in front of people like yourself, which are silly, but that's okay because
100%.
they can learn in this space. And we feel like that's the skill that gets them forward. So I would say the strategic and the executional bit, that's both together hand in hand. So skills to be able to answer the why behind what they're doing. That's what we need to do as institutes.
Thank you so much, Rumaila. To what extent, and now there is a lot of convergence in what you're saying, that it is technologies, of course, non-negotiable. It helps us in various ways, but at the end of the day, you need to understand the purpose behind what we are doing, and that requires. To what extent do you think that would require future marketeers to develop a more keen sense of empathy for the context within which they operate? And how do you go about creating spaces within, our learning spaces or within organizations to continuously hone our empathy for the world around us? And by empathy, I would essentially mean, really trying to understand what matters to people. What is it that makes them, joyous and energized and excited? Because that is where we need to, we need to identify those gaps and then come into the market with the product service experience.
I agree, and I think it's a really challenging question. And I think as a marketer, I've been doing this for 18 years. I still ask that question all the time to myself and my team. And I think as marketers, you never stop asking yourself a question. You never stop that because, as I said previously, you can get caught up in the day-to-day of business and you don't stop and think. And I make a point of my team stopping and thinking, why does this matter? Who are we talking to? And I think what's really important, and I think it gets pushed by the wayside sometimes in businesses, is do some market research. But be clear on what you're researching about. Don't just be like, oh, we fancy doing some market research. You know, I led some market research recently with Nielsen, obviously very well-acclaimed market research provider in the world. And my objective was very clear. I wanted to understand on a very basic level who our customers were. And we're talking demographic, you know, do they live here? Are they tourists? That kind of stuff. And then on a deeper level, what is their spending power?
Yeah.
What are they spending their money on? Or what do they see as important to spend their money on? You know, when we're looking at demographics with a lower disposable income, actually that becomes an even more important question, right? Yeah. If they have only got X amount to spend in a month, what's important to them? Is that going out for food with their family? Is that spending it on the cinema or movies with their kids? Or is that actually getting some new school shoes, for example? And that finding out that information and what's important to customers is really vital, because then you step back and you look at what you've been doing for the last couple of months and think, well, actually, what we need to be doing, it's not a case of, for example, they spend more on one or the other. It's actually they're looking for value. Yeah. So if that's what's driving our customers' value, how do we showcase value? How do we showcase? And value isn't about a discount, right? Necessarily. Value is about, I'm happy to spend this money, but I know I'm getting personal value from that experience, whether that is I'm spending it on entertainment and it's 2 hours worth of entertainment for that money. That's value to me, right? So how do we do that? So yeah, I think, you know, doing your market research, I mean, you can get overwhelmed by data as well. I think that's another thing, you know. It's not about doing market research, again, like I said, for the sake of it, but it's actually having, like, what's your purpose for that market research? Right. What's your objective? What are you really trying to find out at the end of it? And how can that inform what you do next? I think that's really, really important.
So has the approach to market research itself changed substantially? Because, you know, earlier there was a focus on finding solutions. When we look at even business schools, for example, we teach our students various methodologies to arrive at solutions. Increasingly, we are asking the question, it's you will arrive at the solutions, but first define the problem that you want to solve.
Yes.
So how do you think the space of market research is evolving?
I think when I first started my career, all I heard was market research. And I don't know whether that was a regional thing, obviously being from the UK, and I was in a very big corporate organisation and there was a lot of budget for market research. It was like, oh, let's research that, let's research that, let's research that. I think the difference I've seen is, from that perspective, is you research what you need to research and and to your point, have a purpose behind that research. Because I remember being a junior marketer and being very excited by research, whether that was qual or quant, but also being totally overwhelmed and thinking, well, okay, how does that affect my day-to-day job of me, you know, I'm showing my age now, putting together direct mail. How does that impact how I write that letter? But I think it has evolved. I think we're looking at market research in a very more strategic way, and using it and investing in it where it's useful. I think one thing that is probably needed on top of that is more, and I'm not talking about market research from you know, a company going off and interviewing people, but actually having those customer bases that you actually have a customer panel yourself. I think that's always very interesting. I've launched a couple of those in my career, and actually inviting customers.
Right. Yes.
Do you want to be a part of this? And, you know, doing like monthly or quarterly little reviews with them. Again, making it quite structured, but also making it fun so they enjoy what they're doing, and showing that they're going to make a difference to the organisation. Because what customers say, you need to listen to. Yes, there's a lot of people that will say a lot of, you know, things that you think, oh, they're just moaning about that or moaning about this. But actually there is some point to some of those things. And I think we need to not only look at the big customer research activities, but actually looking at our individual customers. You know, if you were an e-commerce business inviting, you know, a bunch of, you know, customers that are always on your website, or those that only come every so often, understanding the difference between that. I think that's very interesting. And I think, we're looking at customer research with a bit more purpose now. And I think, like I said, 15, 18 years ago, it was just research it. And that was not the right approach, I don't think.
How do you see, based on your research and, all that you do with your students and in your own research, how do you see AI, data personalization or immersive storytelling evolving within the research space, and how is it translating into your classrooms?
I think I'll have to build on that research has now evolved to a space where, stepping back. So I think that's a really interesting question. And I think as academics, the big question with research has always been that research was never meant to answer the now. We're supposed to lead with research, right? If we start answering questions which will be relevant currently, then we've missed the boat, right? What's happening in a few years, we don't know anymore. And then we'll be doing the same and always catching up. And at this point, it's a great space to be a market researcher, but it's also a scary space because we have so much data. We have more than we need. I think that's never been the question now. I used to hear that earlier. Do we have the data? We have it. We have it through all these platforms that we use. Do we know what to do with this data is the big question. And that's where it becomes now, again, increasingly important to reflect and be able to ask the why and go back to that. When it comes to research in the space of technology or all the evolution that's happening, I think a big question for me also comes in the space of consumer well-being. I think that personally really interests me as well. Yeah. But the question is that now if we're going to be using technological platforms to co-create and create that value with us, if we're going to be using AI collaboration to give us answers, what does that do to some of our target audiences? The audience that we could somewhat protect or look out for vulnerabilities, the minorities, which AI has its own inherent biases, technology has its own inherent biases. How do we overcome that? And that's where I think the human aspect becomes increasingly important, the human researcher understanding the why. And I think that's a big space as we go forward, the ethical questions and challenges that are coming up with technology. But on the other side, there are also interesting areas such as when you look at social platforms, like you mentioned, social media is just everywhere. It's part of daily life. The Gen Z is actually getting their information from platforms such as TikTok. Yeah. So it's become almost a search engine. Mm-hmm. So what happens when we're using how do algorithms then drive consumer perceptions, consumer consumption habits, how people go out and make purchase decisions, and how is that changing with all these social platforms? And how does that drive decision making? I think that's another really interesting space that we're interested in knowing more. So several areas in terms of AI and human collaboration. When does it become true co-creation? Where these are questions that are arising in this space. Yeah. When it comes to the second part of your question, in terms of students, then how do we teach them? So of course, in terms of teaching them predictive analytics, we're no longer describing what's happening, but how do we predict what's happening in the future? We go back to those questions of understanding why you're doing what you're doing, and then being able to use that data. So I sat through a recent session where somebody was telling us about K-clustering and understanding segments and figure out. And then my last question was, okay, now you know the segments through using an automated tool. What are you going to do with this? Yeah. Right? What do we do with these segments? Yeah. And that had them thinking for a bit, which should have been where we started from. So just reminding our students of that before we actually jump into the hard skills of being able to do so. I mean, we need them both. There's no doubt that we do need those skills. Of course. But we also need to understand how to drive that. And I think it's an interesting time to be a researcher right now.
Yeah.
100%. Thank you, Rumaila, for that very insightful answer. That absolutely research is fundamental, but it is moved beyond asking what and how to why. And while there is data, we have a lot of data, but perhaps uncovering insights from that data is fundamental too, driven by curiosity.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, Jemma, what trends in experiential retail are you most excited about for the next 2 to 3 years?
I think the biggest thing for me at this point in time is the endless possibility that there is at the moment. I think living in 2025, there's so many things happening all the time that the possibilities are endless, and I say that from a blue sky thinking perspective. Yes, when it comes to actually launching something and how much it costs. Obviously, that's not endless. And you do have to actually bring it back down and think, actually, is this going to work? But actually, I think as marketers, we should always be blue sky thinking, and thinking, how can we push those boundaries? And I think with the use of AI and technology and experiential marketing merged together, I think it is endless. And I constantly say to my team, look for ideas out in the market, look at what's happening, right? Often ideas come to you when you're not actually thinking about it. Right. And I think there's so much inspiration everywhere. And I think that's exciting as well. But yeah, I think what excites me is the endless possibilities. Like I said, I think with I was looking at the new Google I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Google VO3, which is the new AI content generator. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And even today, like, I know this kind of technology exists, but when you watch something, a demo of something, and you think, wow, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I think, and I sat there and I thought to myself, do you know what? This is why I'm in marketing, because there's so much possibility and creativity, and there's so much. This is what excites me about what I do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And your excitement shines through. So Jemma, what would you say to a young student in a university who's aspiring to be a marketing professional?
I think the perception of marketing sometimes is looked down upon, but don't let that stop you. I've been called the colouring in team, the fluff and puff team. I've been called all these things, but you know what? We're the team that people come to when sales are down, leads are down, and all of that kind of stuff. You are an important cog in that wheel. You're the creatives, and you're you're commercial as well. And I think that's what people forget. Marketing isn't just about coming up with an ad. It's about, especially when you're in my position, it's actually about commercials. It's about budget planning. It's about, can I get the most for my money? I've dealt with massive budgets and I've dealt with very small budgets, and you still have the same problem, right? Or the same challenge, should I say. If you've got loads of money, you have to justify what you're spending it on. But if you've got no money, you've still got to justify what you're spending it on. Yeah. And actually how you can make that work. I would say to your, marketing students, marketing to me is the best job, because not only do you get to master lots of different things, like I said, finance, creativity, strategy, you kind of do all of those types of things, but you get to see your work come to life. And for me, that still gives me a buzz. 18 years later, when I see whether it's an ad, TV ad, whether it's an out-of-home billboard, whether it's, delivering a Guinness World Record, I still get that buzz today, 18 years later. And I don't think there's any buzz like it. And I would also, going back to one of your points, you talked about teaching them to fail. And I think that's really, really, really great. But I would say it doesn't end at university. I would say in work, especially in marketing, don't be afraid to fail. Fail fast and learn from it. Because I think so much comes from things that don't work. So much comes from that you learn so much, and actually what you learn sometimes is so much more important. Yeah. Yep. So I think don't be afraid, push those boundaries, say your idea. No idea is a silly idea, because you know what, it might not work right now, but in 6 months' time you might come back to that idea.
Yeah, amazing.
Some really, really wise words. Fail fast and fail forward. Thank you so much, Jemma Starzecki, Rumaila Abbas. It's been a pleasure speaking with both of you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.